How would you build a product to teach kids good behavior? That's a real Google interview question and it sounds easy. Most candidates relax when they hear it. They think it's a fun, low stakes design question and land on something simple, a chore tracker, a sticker chart, a gamified habit app. That's the mistake. Every open ended Google product question, this one included, tests the same four things: structure, user empathy, logical prioritization, and creative solutions grounded in feasibility. And if you don't dig for the real user empathy piece, the stakeholder that's easy to miss, you can nail the other three and still not get the offer. Hi, I'm Muthu. I've been a PM at Google, Flipkart, and other tech companies for over 12 years. This is PM Up Level, interview prep for senior level PM roles in India. Subscribe. One video a week, all of it from 12 years of experience interviewing and being interviewed for India PM roles. I've spent 4 years at Google as a product manager. I've interviewed and given feedback for dozens of candidates. I know exactly what the interviewer writes down. Let's name what's actually being graded here. Because most candidates treat an easy sounding question like this as a fun, low stakes throwaway. Every open ended Google product question, design a shoe, teach kids good behavior, whatever the topic is, tests the same four things: structure, can you take a vague prompt and organize it clearly? User empathy, do you understand who the user actually is, not the obvious one, the one that's easy to miss? Logical prioritization, can you make a trade off and justify it? And creative solutions grounded in feasibility, can you land a non obvious idea and actually defend it? This question in particular is where user empathy gets tested hardest. Google doesn't test it with a values questionnaire, they test it by handing you a design question where the real stakeholder is easy to miss and watching whether you find them on your own. A question like teaching kids good behavior looks like a parenting app case. It's actually a test of whether you notice who the real stakeholders are, not just the kid, but in the Indian context, often someone less visible than the kid. The answer that sounds fine and still fails. Here's the answer I hear most often. Candidate picks kids as the users, maybe splits by age, lands on a habit tracking app, kids complete daily tasks like brushing teeth or reading, build a streak, earn badges, and climb a leaderboard. It's clean, it's structured, it could work for literally any behavior in any country for any age group. That's exactly the problem. Swap good behavior for homework or fitness, nothing in the answer changes. There's no insight into what good means in this specific cultural context, and no thought for the people in it whose backgrounds and perspectives differ from the candidate's own. The interviewer's note on that answer reads: clean structure, generic, doesn't understand what this question is really asking. That doesn't get the offer. Candidates solve the visible problem, never notice the quieter one underneath. Here's how I'd answer it. I'd follow the same framework I follow for every design question, but I wouldn't open by announcing it to the interviewer. The first step in that framework is clarify, so that's what I'd actually do first. Step 1, clarify. I'd ask any constraints on company, stage, or market, and when we say good behavior, do we mean values like honesty or respect or rules like bedtime or screen time? If none are given, I'll assume a startup, Indian market, no major resource constraints, and that good behavior means values, not rules, since that's harder, more interesting version of this question. I'm free to choose which specific value to focus on. Does that work? Now that's settled, I'd lay out the framework to the interviewer and get alignment. Here's how I'll structure the rest of this interview. After clarifying, we will set a goal. Then segment the users and pick one, map their pain points, design the solution, call out trade-offs, and close with metrics. That's alignment, not a framework name. I'd never say I'm using circles out loud. I'd just walk it. Step 2, set a goal. I'd separate the business goal from the user goal and I'd deliberately not name a specific metric yet because the metric depends on a solution I haven't designed. Business goal, adoption, since this is a new product. User goal, measurable behavior change in children, not just engagement with an app. I'd say I'll define the actual success metric once I've designed the solution, since a metric only means something in the context of what it's measuring. For now, the target is adoption plus real behavioral change. Step 3, user segment. I'd start broad, then prioritize the same way I would for any segment by the size of the segment and its fit to the goal I just set. Children span a wide age range, and this problem looks completely different depending on where you are in that range. Teenagers, a sizable group, but behaviors are already largely formed. So this becomes correction, not shaping, a poor fit for a goal built on durable behavioral change. Kids 7 to 12, also sizable, but they're developing independent judgments, so they push back on anything that feels like parental control, which fits the goal only partially. Kids under 7. This is where parents are most actively and consistently shaping behavior in the first place. The biggest addressable window in practice and the best fit to the goal, because behaviors here are highly malleable and almost entirely shaped by what parents model and reinforce. Same effort, most durable change. So that's my segment. Gender doesn't change any of that pattern, so I designed gender agnostic and I designed for India specifically because the behavior worth prioritizing is culturally specific, which is my next step. Step 4, pain points. Again, I'd walk what's actually happening before naming anything, then prioritize the same way I would any pain point by how frequently it's felt, how severe it is, and whether solving it actually fits the goal I set in step 2. Does this produce real behavior change, not just engagement? The child isn't the one with the pain here, the parent is. A parent wants to instill values like honesty, kindness, and respect, but they can't be present for every moment. They can't monitor constantly and try to reinforce multiple values at once because then none of them land. That's high frequency, it happens constantly, but low fit because spreading across multiple values means none of them land deeply enough to actually produce change. Weighing against the goal, the real pain isn't any one value, it's focus. Which single behavior reinforced consistently actually produces change? That's the pain I designed for. Now, which behavior, and here I'd prioritize the same way by how frequently the interaction happens, how severe the current gap is, and how well it fits the goal of real lasting behavioral change. In India, specifically, respect for elders sits at the center of how families define good character, and elders here mean teachers, parents, relatives, neighbors. Weighed against those three criteria, most of that list falls away. Relatives and neighbors are low frequency, occasional visits, not daily moments, so there's no repeatable moment to reinforce anything. Teachers and parents are already high respect by default, low severity, there's less of a gap to close, and weaker fit to a goal built around real change. But household help is high on all three. Frequency is high. These are daily interactions, not occasional ones. Severity is high because this is the group children often see adults dismiss, which means the modeling in most homes is currently working against you. And fit to the goal is strongest here too, because this is where the gap between how a child should treat people and how they are currently being shown to is actually big enough to move. If a child genuinely learns to respect the person with the least power in the house, respect for every other elder follows. That's where the leverage is, and respect compounds beyond itself. A child who genuinely respects the elders around them becomes far more receptive to absorbing whatever those elders model honesty, patience, kindness, not just from being told, but from actually watching and wanting to be like them. That's what makes respect the single most critical value to prioritize. It's not competing with the other four for attention, it's the one that makes the rest of them teachable. Step 5, solution. I'd frame it from the outcome first. Imagine a child who greets the household help by name, who's patient while they're working, who asks how their day was, not because a parent is standing over them, but because it's become how they naturally treat people. What would build that? A weekly activity set by the parent, specific and small. Greet them on arrival. Sit for 2 minutes and ask about their family. Say goodbye when they leave. The parent marks whether it happened. That's the core loop. Right here is where I'd layer the creative insight because it grows directly out of a choice I've already made. I deliberately keep the child off the app entirely. Under 7, the parent is the interface, not the child. Because screen time at this age works against the mission I'm building toward. Protecting the child from an app they don't need is itself part of the answer to what this question is testing. It's respect for the child as a stakeholder, not just a user to engage. The second layer sits on top of the completion data. I'd reward the behavior, but not the way most habit apps do. No visible points balance, no shop to redeem in, because a visible, predictable reward turns the behavior into a transaction. Child performs respect to earn the reward, which is the opposite of what I'm building. Instead, rewards are surprise granted by the parent, spaced out, unpredictable, framed as because I noticed how respectfully you treated Kamala Akka today. Never as a payout. That one change is what keeps the product honest about its own mission instead of quietly undermining it. Step 6, trade offs. I'm choosing one behavior over 5, so the product looks narrower than a general purpose parenting app, and I'm choosing no child facing screen at all, which means less obvious engagement to point to. Both are deliberate, Depth on one behavior done with genuine respect for both the child and the household worker is worth more than the breadth with no real change behind it. Step 7 Metrics. North Star is weekly active parents, defined as a parent setting an activity and marking whether the child completed it that week. But completion isn't proof of internalization. So the guardrail is a periodic parent survey asking whether the child is starting to do this unprompted or only when the app nudges them. If that guardrail ever slides, the product is producing compliance, not character, and that's worth catching early. So, where did the actual signal show up in that answer? Not in the topic. Plenty of candidates land on teach kids values as the theme and still fail this. It showed up in 3 specific choices. Picking the household worker as the behavior target because that's where respect is genuinely tested, not performed. Keeping the child off the app because building this responsibly means protecting the youngest user in the system on their own terms, even though nobody asked me to. And designing the reward mechanic to avoid turning a value into a transaction because real user empathy shows up in whether your solution actually embodies the consideration it claims to teach, not just whether the topic mentions it. That's the difference between an answer about respect and an answer built with respect. Here's the real bar on this kind of question, and it's the same bar behind every open ended Google product question. Structure and a creative solution grounded in feasibility get you in the room. The user empathy piece, finding and protecting a perspective that isn't your own, on your own, without being asked to, is what separates competent from hired. That's what gets written in the debrief. Not just strong PM, but this person will make Google's products better for everyone, not just the average user. In the comments, tell me which stakeholder you almost missed the last time you answered a design question. The one whose background or perspective was easiest to overlook. And if you're prepping for a Google loop specifically, I have broken down another one of these ambiguous design questions. Design a shoe in a separate video, link in the description. Subscribe to PM Up Level, one video a week, straight from 12 years on both sides of creativity.